All right, guys, what's up? This is episode 2 of the bodybuilding education series that we started. Today, I'm excited about the topic. We're going to jump into the early years of bodybuilding, which I feel like I might be able to give you guys a lot of just experience-based help. I think really more than anything when it comes to the early years of bodybuilding is just to not lose why you started it, and the love and passion that you have for it. And oftentimes we get so caught up in the minutia of, trying to get better or trying to progress at such a fast rate that it becomes not fun anymore. So when we look at the younger years of bodybuilding, I like to, say that ignorance is bliss. I mean, I have some crazy stories of things that I did when I was younger. So I'm more than happy to share those, and some of them might pop up through these questions. But we're going to jump into this. Hopefully this will be a help to you guys, and just really seek out to keep the fun in this, because that's obviously why we do this. You train, you love the feeling of training, you love what training does for you, you love what training does to your physique, and ultimately that's why we got into the gym in the first place. So through these early years, as you're seeking to gain and make progress, just make sure you don't lose sight of that.
Question number 1, how do I get abs and be shredded in the shortest amount of time?
All right, we're starting out with a real banger of a question here. How do you get abs and be shredded in the shortest amount of time possible? So I'm going to try to give you somewhat of a realistic response to this. Again, it would come down to understanding what your base calorie needs are, which is what your current diet looks like, all right? And you need to establish that. And then from there, you can, and there's going to be different trains of thought here, but you can be aggressive in the pull that you make. And that pull in terms of calories can come from obviously the caloric intake that you're consuming from food, as well as your energy expenditure. So if you're really trying to look to do something as fast as possible, I would be more aggressive on the pull of calories, looking maybe somewhere in the range of 800 to 1,000 off the bat. And then if you are doing no cardio, I would start the cardio at, let's say, 25 minutes, 5 to 6 times a week. If you're doing 25 minutes of cardio already, I would bump that up to 45 minutes, 5 to 6 times a week. So basically your cardio expenditure, I would double whatever you're doing now to a certain point. There's always the outliers. If you're already doing 2 hours of cardio, you're in trouble. Okay. And that's basically the bottom line. So hopefully you're somebody, whoever asked this question, that really isn't doing a lot in terms of cardiovascular output, energy output, and that's going to be the way to fast track it the best. Now, the other end of this is within these caloric restrictions, you do want to keep thyroid hormone, metabolic function as high as possible as you're pulling down. So at some point when you start to feel overly depleted, start to really pay attention to your biofeedback. That could be how you're feeling in the gym. Really, the first metric that I would consider is your performance. If your performance starts to suffer several days in a row, I would then reintroduce calories back in for 1 to 2 days to kind of push that off and then go back into that hard push. So let's say, for example, if you start off on 2,700 calories and we make an aggressive pull and you're down to 1,900 to start, your cardio goes from 20 minutes 5 times a week to 40 minutes 5 times a week. That's your base, okay? And then let's say you did that for 11 days, and then days 11 and 12, you really started to feel pretty depleted in the gym. You weren't hitting the numbers you used to hit, which is going to happen if you're being, aggressive with your cut. On day 13, I would bring the calories a little bit north of where you started your baseline diet. So if your baseline diet started at 2,700, let's try 29 to 3,000, refeed there for a day and a half, and then go back into that deficit.
So question 2, how do you feel about steroids being normalized by a younger audience in social or on social media today?
Honestly, I came from a background, and my initial drive in bodybuilding was to see what I could accomplish naturally. And not only that, but I think what we lose, especially in this social media generation, is we're so quick to lose the pursuit of what a realistic timeline looks like, and I always like to, for me personally, and you, if you're not athletic, you might not grasp onto this, but I always like to relate as often as I can. I like to relate bodybuilding back to athleticism. So for example, you might start playing basketball at 5 or 6 years old. And obviously the first is to, simply put the ball in the basket. And then you learn dribbling technique. And then you learn how to shoot a free throw. And then you might learn how to set up an offense properly. And then you learn how to dribble within that offense. And then you learn how to pass within that offense. And there's all these little checkpoints that you have to do in order to become successful. You don't have 5 or 6 year olds saying, hey, I'm going to turn pro in the next 1 to 2 years. But yet that's the everyday realistic expectation of people entering bodybuilding. And yes, bodybuilding does allow for that. And you have your genetic outliers that make that happen and put popularity to that every day. One of them is in this building. Chris Bumstead's rise to the top has been extremely fast, but he is not the norm, And I think for most of us, we need to realize what the norm is. And, I tell athletes every single week, if you want to be the best that you can be at bodybuilding, you need to go as hard as you can at it and be perfect in your execution for 10 years. And that to me is when I really start to see people peak, is in that 8 to 10 year time frame. That's personally when I peaked. I was not genetically elite, and it took me years of being perfect day in and day out to be genetically elite. Now, granted, guys, obviously steroids within bodybuilding is a very real thing, but I do think that we need to take the time to be obsessive in our pursuit, obsessive in how we put forth effort in the gym, obsessive in how we go about rep execution in the gym, obsessive about, our recovery, our what time we go to bed, like all these little check marks that most of us aren't doing before we become reliant on a supplementation outside of those things. That just says a lot about the type of person that you are, and then what you hold yourself to. So yes, am I saying that nobody at a young age should take steroids? Absolutely not. If you are super passionate about this sport, then obviously that might be part of it for you. But at the same time, like if you're not perfect in everything that you can do under your control first, you're not going to get the most out of it. And that to me is a super important thing, And again, like you might be young and 21 and you might still be partying, or you might not have a set bedtime. You might not have a set wake up time. If you're even considering going on anabolics or being enhanced, I would get all those little checkpoints in place first, see how much you can actually maximize your performance there, and then add in from there, rather than adding in first when basically all the other variables that are really important are in disarray.
Question 3, if you could go back to your earlier days of training, what would you do differently?
Okay, so I really like this question because my early days of training were actually very, very well thought out, and they were very methodic. And what I would do differently is I wouldn't allow bodybuilding media to change my perception of what popular or what proper training should look like. So I actually started out, and I'll just kind of jump into this. When I was in 7th grade, my best friend still to this day, his name is Jim Haymore. He was doing Leo Costa's Titan method. Leo Costa's Titan method has been adapted and changed a little bit by Scott Stevenson, who many of you may know. But this was a very, very well thought out training program. It was 4 days a week. It was an upper-lower split. It was incredible. So that was my start. Now, granted, I will say I really didn't have the base strength to basically jump into working out, to jump into bodybuilding, and to do Leo Costa's Titan method all within a month time frame. But I'm so thankful that I got that initial start for how I perceived what proper programming should look like. And I carried that throughout my high school years. So basically all of my high school years, I did some form of Leo Costa's Titan training system. And then I went into college. And again, my degree is in exercise science. So I was learning proper programming. I was learning, how to set up workout programs properly, how to base them off of proper exercise selection, warm-up protocols, all these things that now I use. But as I really got into bodybuilding, I started to, really look up to the guys that I respected on stage and Flex magazines and MD. And all of a sudden I saw 4 sets of 12 on this, 4 sets of 15 on this, 8 sets of 16 on this. And I went from this very methodical program, low volume program with an emphasis on perfect reps, perfect rep execution, gaining strength within set movements, not changing movement patterns. So basically this randomized buffet of exercises that I was choosing every week. And quickly I stopped making progress, but in the back of my mind, I'm like, no, this has to be right. This is what all the top pros are doing. This has to be the way that you train. when in reality, what I was doing previous to that I was actually progressing on was the way that I should have been training all along. So it really took me, honestly, from about 2010, 2011 until 2015 to get back on the right path from a training standpoint. And what I will say is from 2010 to 2015, I learned a lot of mental toughness within training. I was doing way too much volume, but I loved pushing my body to these volume extremes, more so from a mental strength standpoint than an actual what it was doing to my progress during that time. So if anything, I wouldn't get sidetracked on what the top guys are doing, because again, unless you are genetically elite and unless you are on that path, you're never going to maximize your progress trying to replicate what they're doing. But again, get on a solid training program that you can get as many quantifiable variables in place as possible. Check the boxes of, am I progressing? Am I not? That should be a question in your mind every single week. And you should have variables that you can look at to say, yes, Matt, I am progressing, or no, Matt, I'm not. And then through those variables being set every week, you're going to be able to pinpoint which are working, which isn't working. Is it a volume equation? Is it a lack of recovery? What is going on that stopped you from being able to progress at the rate that you should, and then adjust those variables so that way you can continue to drive that progress forward.
All right. What are some tips that you would give anyone who wants to compete but cannot afford a coach?
That, in essence, is why I'm doing this educational series. Now, granted, with the content that we put out so far, is that enough for you to piece together to learn how to do a full contest prep on your own? Well, no, absolutely not. But hopefully these hierarchy of topics over time will help you get there. But what I would really focus on more than anything else, that if you want to compete, is building a serious, strong foundation for yourself. Get strong, like really strong. And obviously strength is a relative term, but for yourself, for what you're capable of, surpass those expectations. Get really strong, stay really strong for a while, and then go through a methodical fat loss phase. And more than anything, I touched on this in the last episode about fat loss. Make sure that you give yourself more time than what you think you realistically need to reach those goals. Make sure you have a support system along the way of people that encourage you, of people that don't hold your hand, of people that don't coddle you. But drive you to be the best version of yourself. I think that's super important. And then also too, within giving yourself enough time, building a really strong base, I would also, and this can kind of be controversial, I would not give up on what is allowing you to put food on the table for yourself. So don't abandon your jobs. Don't abandon how you're making money. These are things that I see far too often within the bodybuilding subculture, of people just basically throwing everything to the side for their pursuit of getting on stage. But yet in the process, or the day after the show, they wake up and they're like, holy cow, I have no money. I'm in debt. I just paid all this money. Don't give up what you're doing on a day-to-day basis to provide for yourself, for your family, for any of the above, for the sake of bodybuilding. That to me is super important. So I just want to share that as well. Okay, so the question is, how should I structure food? And to intro this episode, I talked about ignorance is bliss. And guys, I would, when it comes to structuring food, basically these are the two parameters that I would set, or three. I would hit protein totals based off of lean body mass. And I want to start off there. Make sure that you're hitting protein totals based off of lean body mass and not total body weight. Okay, so that's a big difference. So if your lean mass, let's say realistically, is 170 pounds, your total body weight is 210 pounds, which is probably a very realistic number. Hit your protein goals off of 170 pounds, not off of 210 pounds. All right, that could be 1.2 grams per pound. That could be 1.5 grams per pound. Whatever that is for you, I would hit your protein goals there. That would be the start. And then also the second thought process I would have is to make sure that you're not consuming calories at a rate that are going to make you overly fat. And then outside of that, have fun with it. Pay attention to your digestion. Don't continue to consume foods that are messing up your digestion. Don't continue to consume foods that are making you gassy. You should not have consistent gas on a daily basis. If you're having that much issues, it's something that you're consuming that's causing that. And a lot of bodybuilding foods do that. A ton of egg whites will do that. Too much whey isolate will do that. Too much whey isolate will also make you pee out of your butt. Pay attention to these things. Whey concentrate. The quality of the protein that you're consuming matters. But really, when one of the biggest mistakes that I made, because I am not somebody, especially from my genetic background, that can consume a ton of calories without getting fat, and I thought basically more calories just equated to more muscle, even in a natural environment. So I was over consuming. And this is a funny story, but I bought from GNC, they might even still have this product, but I bought Mass Triple X, which is their weight gainer formula. And so I worked at a gym, and I would work out at the gym from about 8 to 9:30 at night. I would close the gym at 10. So from working out, as soon as I finished my workout, I'd have a Mass Triple X shake at 9:30, which was over 1,000 calories. Again, I was 18 years old. I didn't have very much muscle. I would close the gym at 10. I would immediately go across the street to Waffle House. And at Waffle House, I would eat healthy. I would get egg whites cooked without oil or butter, and I would get steamed hash browns. So I would have that about 10:30, and then I would have a 30-minute drive home. I would prep my food for the next day, and then I would have another large meal before bed, and then I would set my alarm, and I would wake up in the middle of the night, and I would have Mass Triple X again before, in the middle of the night before waking up the next day. So that being said, I was way over consuming calories and just watching myself get fatter on a daily basis. And I thought, this is the environment that I needed to put muscle on. That's not what you need. Now, granted, I think I had the protein portion of that right. I was way over consuming fats and carbs, which was my issue at the time. So really, again, what I would consider, and base your whole diet around is hitting protein requirements, having your rate of gain be 0.25 to 0.5 pounds per week. And again, that doesn't have to be every single week, because you need to be realistic about what your rate of gain is going to equate to in terms of lean body tissue. The goal of bodybuilding is to add as much lean body tissue as possible, not to add as much scale weight as possible. And a lot of people confuse those two things. And then really just fit your fats and carbs in based off of that rate of gain and your satiety. You want to go into your training well fueled. You don't want to go into your training feeling depleted. And then on the back end of your training, this is not endurance sports. Lifting weights is not an endurance activity. The need to replenish with carbohydrates isn't like a massive goal the second you finish your workout. You can wait a little while, relax, allow your blood glucose to stabilize, or allow your heart rate to return back to normal, allow that post-workout stress to baseline, get back down to normal. Then consume a meal of all three, fats, carbs, and protein, and then go about your day. But really, again, guys, I would really focus on hitting protein needs, having fun with it, making sure that your digestion agrees with the foods you're consuming, and then just keep track of your weight on a weekly basis to make sure you're not gaining or losing at too fast of a rate, which is going to negate the performance benefits that you're trying to gain from all this to begin with. All right, so that's going to wrap up phase 1 of episode 2. Again, we'll kind of keep this format the same. So if you guys have questions specifically related to the early years of bodybuilding that I didn't cover here, we're going to then do part 2 of this episode next time. I'll address those questions first before we go on to the next subtopic or subcategory that we're going to go into. So again, guys, I appreciate the support. We'll continue to post this on our social media channels as well. And I'll just continue to pump these out as often as I can based off of our weeks here at Raw.